Let's suppose you have data that you need to enter that is a sentence, a paragraph, or something like that. Here's an example. Enter a complete sentence. Well, okay, let's type in a sentence. Okay, let's just say I like to write computer programs, right? So that's a complete sentence. And when I type enter, then it says you entered I like to write computer programs. How do you write a program that will read in something like this? Here's a complete sentence. I like to write computer programs. Notice that there are spaces between I and like, link and to. See all those embedded spaces? Well, we know already that CN is not going to want to do this because CN is going to stop when it sees a space. Okay, so unless we had variables for every word, then we can't really use CN. And it's impossible to know how many words a sentence is going to have. So let's look at an alternate way that we can read in data that has embedded spaces and in general embedded white space. It turns out that this is a really simple program to do if we want to read in a sentence. So I'm just going to use this template, as you can see here, just a very basic, almost hello world template in order to implement this program. Well, the way that we read in a sentence is to use a new input mechanism called getline. Getline requires a string variable in order to read in the data. So I need to declare something to be a type string, and I'm going to call it sentence. So string sentence, except I need to spell it right. Okay, and then if I want to read that in, then let's write a prompt to the screen. Cout, please enter a complete sentence. So that'll be our prompt. Put an end line here. And then, in order to read in the sentence, we use getline. So it's getline. Getline has two arguments. The first one is the input source, which is our default input, and that's from the keyboard. And then the second argument is the actual string variable that we declared up above, and that's just sentence. Okay, and a semicolon afterwards. So what this does is the following. It takes the input stream, CN. Later we'll see we can attach that to a file. But for the time being, we're just using our input keyboard. And the second argument has to be a string variable. So that'll be very important. So remember, that has to be a string type over here, as you can see from the little pop-up. Now, and this lets us type something in. So now in order to see what we entered, let's write it back out. Looks like I've got the caps lock on. So we'll do a cout, and let's say double quote, you entered, with a colon there, and a space, and then we'll just put the variable sentence here with another end line. All right, so that's all that we really need to do. This is demonstrating the getline input method. So let's compile the program and run it. Okay, so now the program is running. So we have the prompt, please enter a complete sentence. So I'll type something in. I like to write computer programs. Okay, so now when I hit the enter key, then the entire sentence is read by getline, and then it's printed back out here. So the complete sentence that I typed is stored in the variable sentence, spaces and all, and then I print it back out here. One thing you need to know about the getline is that it's terminated by an end of line character. Okay, so let's put a comment here, terminated by an end of line character. All right, now you've seen this in a couple of different ways, and it's all activated when you hit the enter key. All right, so let's put the enter key here. So whenever you hit the enter key, then that puts this end of line character onto our input, and that's what terminates the get line. So we will continue to read whatever you type all the way up until it finds an end of line character, which is input by the enter key. So that's how it works. Now, let's modify this a little bit, because I told you couldn't do this with the CN. So let's modify this and let's see what CN would give us by itself. So let's edit the program, and instead of using this get line, then I'm going to comment that out temporarily, and I'm going to use CN instead. So let's do CN and input sentence. So we'll read in sentence with CN, and then we'll print it back out again. But this time now, let's see what we get. So I'll compile the program again and run it. So now we have the program running. Let me scroll up so we can see the code as well. Please enter a complete sentence. Well, okay, I'll type something in, and I don't want to start with the word I this time. Let's say the weather is very nice today. Okay, so there's a complete sentence with a misspelling in it, today. Okay, now when I hit enter, and the CN statement will read in the sentence and print it back out again, then notice you entered the. So with CN, I only get the first word, and that makes sense because remember, when CN encounters a space, then it thinks that it's separating the data items from each other. So that space after the indicates to the CN statement right there that, hey, I'm done with this input. If you want to read the rest of the input, then you have to have some additional variables over here. And I mentioned earlier that with a sentence, you don't know how many words you're going to have, so you can't anticipate exactly how many variables you would need in order to read in a sentence like that. So that shows you the difference between the CN and getline. So whenever you need to read in a sequence of information like this that is that contains white space and has spaces, then getline is what you need to use. We'll stop the program. One last thing, and this is really important, we'll see it coming up in future lessons, is that when you read something in with getline, then that is a string constant. You can read in anything that you want to with getline, including numbers. We can read in a sequence of numbers, but those numbers would end up as ASCII encoded form, so you could not calculate with them. So it works great if you're just dealing with words and phrases and you don't need to do computations. But if you want to read in several numbers at once with one big long line, then we have to do something extra, and that'll come up in the next few lessons. All right, so there's your introduction to getline, and I think we'll stop the video here.